Hey there, this is Perch. And, there's been a lot of negative comments, and I made some myself, so I'm not portraying myself as immune from this. But there's been a lot of negative comments about writing for trade. And the basic origin of this was, and I want to say Bendis was really what got a lot of people, this idea got in people's heads, is that there's a story that the writer wants to tell. It's really a kind of a 2 or 3 issue story. That's how much story there is, how much content there is to the story. But the writer is writing for trade, and that's kind of shorthand for saying we're trying to get to about 6 issues, so we can have the right number of pages to justify the creation of a trade paperback. Now, there's been some cheating with that. You can do a trade with 5 issues and some bonus material. I mean, God help us all. I'm a big fan of bonus material scripts and sketches and some of that other stuff. And if the publishers really grab onto that idea, I mean, in theory, you could have a trade paperback with like 2 or 3 issues, and then kind of the original pencils, and here's the pencils and the inks but no colors, and here's the original script, and here's the 30 variant covers, and pretty soon you could fill up your trade, those pages with just a bunch of bonus content. So I'm not I'm not suggesting that. Anyway, that's on the side. I think that the idea of writing for trade got negative because it was this decompressed storytelling, which is I've got enough story for 3 issues, but I'm going to just extend these scenes out to 6 issues. So I'm gonna just take my time, have a lot of dialogue. Rather than the hero rushing in and like stopping the bad guy, the hero's gonna think about it. We're gonna get some shots of the hero maybe at night, kind of mulling it over while they sleep, and then they're gonna wake up the next morning, go get coffee, and there'll be kind of a funny moment where the barista gets the Captain America's coffee order wrong, and then Captain America goes, "Oh, back in my day, coffee was 10 cents," and then 6 pages have gone by, and so that was kind of the negative. I don't have any issue with writing for trade. I think that just like a television writer will write for a season or write for a storyline, Chris Claremont would write kind of a lot of storylines all at once. But if you go back and you look at kind of his core stories, he was also doing that kind of 4 to 8 issue kind of area of storylines. He did, and some may go, wait, that's not true. No, it is. If you go back and look at his run, you'll see a lot of one and done issues, but you'll see that his little mini story arcs would typically go kind of on the short side, 4 issues, long side, 6 to 8 issues. Usually you had like 1 to 2 issues of Claremont kind of teeing up the idea kind of in the background or as a subplot. Then you have 4 issues of really hammering that plot home as the main story, and then like 1 to 2 epilogue issues kind of dealing with the after effects. That was kind of your typical Claremont run, and that is writing for trade in a way. The not writing for trade aspect to what Claremont would do is he would have 5 or 6 subplots going on, and so if you're reading that in a trade, you're going. And I remember some editor talking to me about the serious discussion that went on at Marvel. I don't know if this is true or not. Of well, should we just kind of edit Claremont's work? Should we remove those pages? Like if we want to take the Dark Phoenix saga and we want to put it into a trade paperback, should we go through and edit out all the panels and the pages that were teeing up other storylines and future storylines, things that were not the Dark Phoenix saga? Should we just keep it really tight and clean? And I think that there was even some experiments to do that in the 90s, where there was some editing of what we call auxiliary material out to just keep a nice tight story. But ultimately, that really makes collectors annoyed, and it's also taking a scalpel to somebody else's comic is it's never a good idea. It's not going to end well. But the problem, I think, in a lot of cases, and this is so true with so many things in social media, the problem is never writing for trade, or it's kind of people will cite one problem, but really they mean a different problem. And so the issue is not writing for trade. The issue is bloated kind of nonsense storylines because the writer doesn't have enough content, so they're filling in with a bunch of silliness. And then on top of that, there are a decent handful of writers that have gotten confused as to what the important part of the comic is. Is it the main plot or is it the silliness? And I mentioned this before, and I still maintain Scott Pilgrim, which is a a comic, people call it manga. That's no, it's graphic novel. It's not manga. It came from the U.S. Um, Scott Pilgrim, I think, is a great graphic novel. I think it tells a good story. I think it does something different. I think it's lifestyle based, and O'Malley does a really good job with that kind of graphic novel story. But I also think that people read that, a lot of aspiring comic creators, and it hit at a moment where people were looking for different types of stories. You had the early 2000s where you had a lot of dark and gritty kind of death stories and Avengers Disassembled and a lot of kind of very more grown up comics, if you will. Comics had stepped up a little bit, and so a lot of aspiring writers picked up Scott Pilgrim, and it was a revelation. It was something new and different and exciting, and people are like, oh, I'm one in on this. I'm excited by this new type of writing, and so they mirrored some of their stories and some of their writing after O'Malley and Scott Pilgrim. And the problem was they took the wrong lessons out of that graphic novel. First, O'Malley is kind of a master at that style. It's like Rumiko Takahashi is obviously a huge influence on O'Malley, and Takahashi's work with Ranma and with Lum, and I know that's not the name of the series, but all these One Pound Gospel and Mason Miyazana Coco, tongue tied. She's got a style of writing. It would be like if you know, got David Lynch, and you're like, all right, David Lynch, we've hired you to do the live action remake of Bambi by Disney. So make it feel like Bambi. That would be a horrible idea. I love David Lynch, but that would be stupid because you will get the horrifying Bambi of all time if you do that. I think that a lot of people started to kind of ape or copy Brian O'Malley's style with Scott Pilgrim, and that led to this kind of bloated, decompressed writing for trade nonsense where you're going to have half of the comic. You're going to have like 20 pages devoted to. I used that example in jest earlier, but it's really not. It's like the hero goes into the coffee shop and the barista recognizes him, and funny awkward moment, and then the hero's like, I forgot to change out my superhero costume. That's why I'm dressed up like Black Widow right now. And they're like, oh, no problem, Black Widow. That kind of the barista is unflappable of like the superheroes coming in. It's like, hey, no villains in here today. No, of course not. And you just eat up pages and pages of just nonsense talk that worked in Scott Pilgrim because the whole story is around very human story, very relatable, very kind of page of life with these fantastic situations around it, and the character was written and tailor made to be that. Whereas if you try and shove that suddenly into the Avengers or Hulk or Batman or it doesn't, Plastic Man, it doesn't work. It just makes you sound like a crazy person, and it's boring to the readers. Readers are coming to Batman to see Batman. They're not coming to Batman to see Scott Pilgrim with Batman costumes in it. And that's I think the big, that when people say writing for trade sucks or they hate writers who write for trade, it's not the trade paperback's fault. It's not the idea that you're trying to write a tight 6-issue storyline and fit within that box. It's that you're having to insert things into the comic that really make no sense for that comic. That's the flaw in writing for trade. Anyway, that's what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Are you one of those people who just like you only collect trade paperbacks and don't understand at all what I talked about? Or do how do you feel about decompressed storytelling? How do you feel about writing for trade? What's on your mind? Let me know. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notification. Please make sure you're still subscribed. Tell a friend. That would be great. Share this video link, please. I'd love to have some new voices, new people checking it out. Maybe it'll be good for them. Who knows? Follow me on social media, Comic Perch, and most importantly, thanks for listening.